My name is William Mason. I'm a consulting engineer, and I live in a quiet, isolated suburb outside of Asheville, North Carolina. For many years, my work kept me traveling constantly, flying across the country, overseeing specialized infrastructure projects, while my heart stayed back home with my wife, Julia, and our son, Ethan. If you're just starting to watch this story now, take a deep breath. Because what I'm about to tell you is something I never imagined would happen to my son in the specialized residential school we trusted. What I found out completely changed my life, and maybe it will change yours too, especially if you have a child with unique needs who you've placed in a care facility. Sometimes we think we know the people closest to us, but there are hidden things that only come to light when we least expect them. If you're connecting with my story, please hit the like button to bring a little sunshine to this father's heart. Subscribe to the Long Distance Father channel so you don't miss my next life stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me really happy to know which corner of the country or the world is listening to me, and what time of day it is for you. It almost started when I noticed a shift in Ethan's behavior. Ethan, as you know, has some sensory sensitivities. He had always been a cheerful kid, the type who would greet me with an over-the-top hug when I arrived for a weekend visit. The one who'd meticulously tell me everything that happened during the week in his structured environment. My son was pure routine, pure innocent focus. At least, that's how I remembered him. It was after a longer gap in my visits, almost 4 weeks away, that I realized something was different. When I arrived at the Harmony House facility for my scheduled check-in, Ethan barely came out of the specialized sensory room to greet me. When I went in to see him, he gave me a hug, but he seemed distant, with a look in his eyes I had never seen before. I figured he was just overstimulated. Maybe the noise level was too high. "Everything okay, son?" I asked, tapping his forearm lightly like I always did. "Yeah, Dad," he replied quietly, not meeting my eyes. Mrs. Evans, his primary caregiver, appeared in the doorway. "He's been like that these past few days, Mr. Mason. A little quiet. We think it's just a developmental phase. He's adjusting to a new schedule. Come on, Ethan, lunch is ready." That afternoon, I watched my son during his meal. He ate slowly, his head bowed. I noticed he would glance at Mrs. Evans sometimes, as if he was afraid of doing something wrong. And the strangest part, he had bite marks on his lower lip and was nervously rocking back and forth, like he hadn't been able to self-regulate well in a long time. "How are the new therapy sessions going, buddy?" I tried to strike up a conversation. "Fine," he answered without looking up. "And what about your favorite activity? Are you still using the big blue balance ball?" That's when I saw Mrs. Evans staring intently at Ethan, who swallowed hard before answering. Later, before I had to leave, I sat with him in the reading nook. When we were alone, I sat on the edge of the beanbag chair and asked him again if everything was okay. That's when he grabbed my hand and said something that chilled me to the bone. "Dad, don't tell the staff I talked to you." "Talked about what, son?" I asked, my heart racing, but before he could elaborate, the door opened. Mrs. Evans appeared in the doorway. "Time for your afternoon quiet session, Ethan. Mr. Mason needs to get back to work." The way my son flinched when he saw his caregiver, that wasn't normal. I kissed his forehead and left, but my head was already spinning 1,000 miles an hour. I couldn't sleep that night. Something was very wrong. I could feel it, and I decided to pay closer attention over the next few days before heading back out on the road. In the days that followed, I observed everything more carefully during my visits. I noticed Ethan wasn't the engaging kid I knew. The director told me he was quieter, less involved in group activities. At home, I spent most of my time alone in the office, but when I called the facility, the staff always said everything was normal. Whenever I asked if everything was all right, he always said yes, but his eyes told a different story. One afternoon, while Mrs. Evans was preparing the medications, I sat with him in the living area and tried to talk. At first he resisted, but little by little he started to open up a bit. "Buddy, you can tell me anything. You know Dad will always protect you." He was silent for a moment, wringing his hands nervously. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I don't like the quiet room anymore, Dad." "Why, son?" "Doesn't Mrs. Evans take good care of you?" "No." He didn't elaborate. He just lowered his head. I pushed a little more. "Ethan, did something happen when Dad was away?" That's when he started to cry softly. I pulled him close for a hug and felt his small body trembling. Between sobs, he whispered, "Dad, please don't tell the staff," I cried. That broke me inside. What kind of fear was this? Why would my son be so guarded around his own caregiver? "Ethan, did Mrs. Evans do something to you? Can you tell me, son?" Just then, we heard the door to the office open. Mrs. Evans announced, "Time to transition, Ethan. Lunch is being served." Seeing us in the living area, she smiled, but I sensed something unsettling about that smile. "What are you two up to?" "Just talking," I replied, trying to sound natural. "Right, son?" Ethan nodded without saying a word and asked to go to the bathroom. When he came back, his eyes were still red from crying, but he tried to hide it. Later, as I was preparing to leave the facility for my next long trip, I questioned Mrs. Evans about Ethan's behavior. "Don't you think he's different? Quieter, more withdrawn?" She shrugged as she reorganized the charts. "It's a phase, Mr. Mason. The kids go through this. One day they're focused. The next, they're more anxious. It's normal, but those nervous tics, the lip biting, it looks like he hasn't been self-regulating well." "He's been having some night terrors," she replied, not looking directly at me. "The kids do that." "And why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to worry you while you were on your project. You have enough on your mind, right?" The explanation seemed reasonable, but something inside me remained unsettled. That night, back at home, I woke up several times thinking about my son, how different he was, the fear in his eyes. And it was during one of those times that I realized the facility's rigid visitation schedule gave me a perfect window. The next morning, using the excuse that I needed to check on a delayed shipment near the facility, I drove straight back to Harmony House. I went straight to Ethan's room during the scheduled therapy hour. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to find a clue about what was going on. That's when I saw an old, soft, weighted blanket I had given him years ago lying beneath his bed. The blanket that Ethan used for comfort was now balled up, hidden, and had what looked like bloodstains on the corner. That puzzled me. My son had always taken excellent care of his comfort items. The next day, I stayed awake on purpose. I drove the 3 hours back to the facility unannounced. Around 11 p.m., I quietly slipped into the hall and crept up to Ethan's door. This time, I waited a few minutes and crept up to the door, trying to hear what was going on inside. That's when I heard the muffled sound of crying. My son was sobbing quietly, as if he was terrified of making noise. "Structure," I heard a caregiver's voice say in a low, firm tone. "It's for your own good, Ethan." What was happening behind that door? What kind of discipline made my son cry in the middle of the night? It was in that moment that I made a decision that would change our lives forever. The next morning, using the excuse that I had an emergency meeting near the city, I left the area quickly. My head was buzzing with thoughts and doubts. Was I overreacting? Was it really just a phase as the staff claimed? But that muffled crying, that fear in my son's eyes, I couldn't shake it. I drove to a store downtown and walked into an electronics shop. A young man served me, and I explained that I needed a small, discreet camera that was easy to install and that I could access from my cell phone. "Is this for home security, sir?" the clerk asked. "Yes," I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. "For my son's security." I left the store with a micro camera that could be easily hidden. The clerk explained how to install it and how to access it through the app on my phone. I never thought I'd reach the point of installing a hidden camera in a place I paid $8,000 a month for to monitor my son's caregiver. But my son's well-being was more important than anything else. When I got back to the facility, the staff was in the common area. Ethan was with a therapist. It was the perfect time. "Did you get what you needed, Mr. Mason?" Mrs. Evans asked, stirring a cup of coffee. "Yeah, I got everything sorted," I lied, slipping the bag with the camera into my jacket pocket. "Just running to Ethan's room to grab a few things." I went into Ethan's specialized room and looked around for the best place to install the camera. I needed an angle that would capture the whole room but wouldn't be easy to spot. Finally, I decided to place it on the top of the white noise machine, hidden behind a stack of therapy books. It was small enough to go unnoticed but well positioned to capture everything that happened in the room. With trembling hands, I quickly set up the camera and tested it on my phone. It worked perfectly. I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that I might finally discover what was happening, and guilt for mistrusting professionals. But something told me I was doing the right thing. That afternoon, during my visit, I tried to act normal, but my stomach was churning. Ethan remained quiet, answering only when spoken to directly, always with that apprehensive glance toward Mrs. Evans. She, for her part, seemed perfectly normal, talking about his successful morning session and plans for a weekend outing. "I have to head back out on the road the day after tomorrow," I commented, watching their reactions. "Long trip, down to the Gulf Coast." I saw Ethan's shoulders slump slightly, and a nearly imperceptible flicker in Mrs. Evans's eyes. "How long this time, Mr. Mason?" she asked with a calmness that now seemed suspicious. "At least 2 weeks, maybe more." Ethan dropped his head further, picking at his food with his fork. Mrs. Evans smiled faintly. "We'll miss you, won't we, Ethan?" He nodded without saying anything. Before I left, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried one more time to get him to talk. "Ethan, you know you can tell me anything, right? Even if someone tells you not to?" He quickly looked towards the door, as if checking if we were really alone. "I know, Dad," he whispered. "Is there something happening that you want to tell me? Something that makes you sad or scared?" His eyes welled up with tears, but he held them back. "I can't, Dad." "Why not, son? Why?" He started, but his voice failed. Just then, We heard footsteps in the hall. It was Mrs. Evans approaching. "It's quiet time, Mr. Mason. You need to get your rest for your trip tomorrow." I gave Ethan one last hug and whispered in his ear, "I love you, son. I will always protect you." When I left the room, I drove straight to a nearby hotel and waited. After a while, I pretended to be asleep. About an hour later, I was wide awake, waiting. Around 11:00 p.m., I quietly reached for my cell phone and opened the camera app. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would beat right out of my chest. On the screen, I saw Mrs. Evans entering Ethan's room. She gently closed the door behind her. Ethan was lying down but awake, as if he was already expecting the nightly visit. I saw him shrink under the covers, pulling the blanket up to his chin. "Mrs. Evans, please," he whispered. "I was compliant today." "You know that doesn't matter, right?" she replied in a voice I'd never heard from her before. Cold, distant. "This is for your growth." That's when I saw something that froze my blood. Mrs. Evans pulled a roll of masking tape from the pocket of her scrubs. In that moment, I felt my entire body go cold. On the small phone screen, I watched my son's caregiver move towards the bed with the tape in her hand. Ethan shrank even further, his little eyes wide with fear. "Please, Mrs. Evans," he pleaded softly. "I promise I'll be quieter." "Shh," she hushed, putting a finger to her lips. "The other residents can't hear, remember? And neither can your dad." With a quick motion, she tore off a piece of tape and without any hesitation stuck it over my son's mouth. My Ethan, my sensitive boy, having his voice silenced in such a cruel way. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "That's better," Mrs. Evans said in a low tone. "Now we won't bother anyone with stimming, right?" Then she pulled a hard plastic sensory block out of her other scrub pocket. Ethan, still with his mouth covered, tried to plead with his eyes. Silent tears began to roll down his little face. "This is for your own good," she continued with that icy voice I wouldn't have recognized as belonging to a professional. "One day you'll thank me for teaching you compliance." What happened next was one of the hardest things I've ever had to witness in my entire life. Mrs. Evans started hitting my son with the block. These weren't light taps or disciplinary swatting like some parents give. They were hard, repeated blows, all while she whispered for him to learn his lesson. Ethan couldn't scream because of the tape, but his body convulsed with every hit. I watched his small shoulders shaking with silent sobs, tears soaking his pillow. And worst of all, I saw a mixture of pain and resignation in his eyes, as if this was a known routine. I wanted to rush out of the hotel, drive the 3 hours back, burst into his room, and make it stop immediately. But a part of me knew I needed concrete proof of what was happening. I needed to document that cruelty to ensure Ethan would never go through this again. So, with a shattered heart, I continued to record. "This is for rocking too much in the sensory room today," I heard Mrs. Evans say between the blows. "You know you can't tell your father about our special sessions." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she stopped. Ethan was huddled in the bed, his little body trembling with mute sobs. "Remember our deal?" Mrs. Evans said, leaning over him. "If you tell your father anything, I'll know, and it will be much worse." Then she ripped the tape off his mouth, making him wince in pain. "Now dry your face and go to sleep. And I don't want to hear a sound. Understand?" Ethan nodded, terrified. Mrs. Evans smoothed the specialized blanket over him as if nothing had happened, as if that gesture could erase the violence from moments before. "Good night, Ethan," she said, then left the room, gently closing the door. In the darkness of my hotel room, with the phone still in my hand and the images of what I had just witnessed searing into my memory, I cried silently. How hadn't I seen it before? How could I have left my son vulnerable for so long? The consulting trips, the long absences, the trust I placed in a facility. How long had this been going on? Minutes later, I stopped crying. I spent the whole night awake, checking the camera periodically. I watched as Ethan, after the caregiver left, cried silently, clutching the balled-up weighted blanket. I watched as he finally fell asleep, exhausted, and I promised myself that I would do everything I could to get my son out of that situation. The next morning, I drove straight to the facility, arriving before the first scheduled therapy session. I tried to act normally, but all I could think about were the images from the night before. "Did you sleep well, Ethan?" I asked, trying not to show what I was feeling. "Yes, Dad," he replied automatically, not looking me in the eye. "Ethan," I called, crouching down to his level. "Look at me." He slowly raised his eyes, and I could see all the fear and pain contained there. "I love you very much," I said, holding his small hands. "And I'm going to do everything to protect you. Do you believe me?" For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by fear when we heard Mrs. Evans approaching the room. "Good morning." "Mr. Mason," she said, entering the room as if nothing had happened, already carrying her charts and a clipboard. "Ready for his morning session? I trust your travel plans are sorted." "After the morning session," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to take advantage of the daylight on the highway." "Very good," she smiled. "Don't worry about a thing. We'll be fine, won't we, Ethan?" My son just nodded without saying anything. After Ethan was taken to his session, I rushed to a nearby coffee shop to make a copy of the video from the night before. I needed to ensure that evidence was safe. I transferred the files to a flash drive and also uploaded them to cloud storage. I couldn't risk losing that terrible but crucial evidence. When I got back on the road that afternoon, it was far from a normal work trip. Every mile that took me away was agony, knowing my son would be in that environment. But now I had a plan, and the camera would remain vigilant, recording everything so I could act with the full force of the law. That night, I parked my rental car at a rest stop far away, and with a heavy heart, accessed the camera app. Just as I suspected, the scene from the night before was repeating itself. Mrs. Evans entered the room, closed the door, and the ritual of abuse began again. "Rock quietly," I heard her say as she applied the tape to my son's mouth. "Your father can never know this." That's when I made a decision that would change our lives forever. I couldn't wait until I returned from the trip. My son would not spend another night in that facility. With trembling hands and tears in my eyes, I called my brother, Julia's brother, Mark Wellington. Mark was always a stand-up man, always loved Ethan dearly. Even though he was geographically close to the facility, I trusted him more than anyone. "William, everything okay? You don't usually call this late," he answered, sounding concerned. "Mark, I need your help," I said, trying to control my voice. "It's an emergency." "It's about Ethan. What happened?" "Is he sick?" "No, it's worse. I need you to go to Harmony House right now and get Ethan out of there. Invent any excuse. Say you need to take him to your place for a weekend trip. Anything. Just get my son away from Mrs. Evans, please. William, you're scaring me. What is going on? Mark, I don't have time to explain everything right now. I'm on the highway, almost 8 hours from the facility. Can I trust you? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then in a serious voice he replied, Yes, you can trust me. I'll go get Ethan right now. Thank you, I sighed, feeling a slight sense of relief. When you have him safe, call me. And please don't tell the facility staff anything more than necessary. I hung up and stared at my phone, praying that Mark could get my son out of that place as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, I got back on the road, driving straight back to Asheville. I didn't care about the project, the job, nothing. I just wanted to get home and protect my son. An hour and a half later, my phone rang. It was Mark. William, I have Ethan here at my house. I told them I needed his help sorting old blueprints for my workshop since I'm starting a big project. They were a little suspicious, but they let him come. We're home with my wife, Sarah. I closed my eyes for a moment, silently giving thanks. How is he? Quiet, kind of scared. He's asked for you several times. Can I talk to him? Sure, hold on a minute. I heard some shuffling and then my son's voice. Dad? Hey, buddy, I said, feeling the emotions swell up inside me. Are you okay there with Uncle Mark? I'm okay, he replied softly. Dad, are you coming to get me? I am, son. I'm driving home right now. I'll get there as fast as I can. It's okay. In the meantime, you stay there with your uncle. He's going to take care of you, okay? Dad. Thank you. That simple thank you broke my heart. My son was thanking me for getting him out of an abusive situation, as if being treated with dignity was a favor. I love you so much, Ethan. We'll be together soon. After speaking with my son, Mark got back on the phone. William, are you going to tell me what's going on? Ethan is terrified of going back to Harmony House. What did that caregiver do? Mark, I know this is hard to believe, but Mrs. Evans has been physically and emotionally abusing Ethan. I have video proof. There was a long silence. This can't be true. They're a highly rated facility. I didn't want to believe it either, I replied, my voice breaking. But I saw it with my own eyes. I installed a camera in his room because I noticed something was wrong. She waits until visiting hours are over, goes into his room in the middle of the night, tapes his mouth shut so he won't make noise, and hits him. They're not therapy sessions, Mark. It's pure violence. Oh my God, he whispered, clearly shaken. I have the videos. I'll show you when I get there. For now, I just need to know my son is safe. He's safe here with me and Sarah. You can rest easy. Mrs. Evans has already called twice, asking when I'm bringing him back. What did you tell her? That I needed his help assembling a complicated shelf for the workshop, and that we were going to stop by the burger spot afterward. I said I'd bring him back later. I don't know if she believed me, but it's the best I could come up with. Thank you, Mark. Seriously, I should arrive home in the morning. I'll come straight to your house. I won't even stop by my place first. We'll be waiting. And William? I don't even know what to say. I never imagined professionals were capable of something like that. Me neither, I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. Me neither. I continued driving all night without stopping for rest. Every moment I thought about my son, about the scars those months or years of abuse would leave on him. How could a professional do that to a vulnerable child? How had I not noticed it sooner? As I drove, I remembered the small signs I had ignored, the dark circles, the withdrawn behavior, the fear in his eyes. Mrs. Evans's excuses about compliance and structure. I remembered all the times Ethan tried to tell me something, but stopped when a staff member walked into the room. All the times he begged me not to travel, to stay home. Around 6 in the morning, I stopped at a gas station to refuel and wash my face. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. While I waited for the attendant to finish pumping gas, I decided to check in once more on what was happening back at Harmony House. I accessed the camera on my phone and saw that Ethan's room was empty, the bed made. But then I heard Mrs. Evans's voice on the phone. "I don't know, Director," she was saying, pacing back and forth in the room. "Mark Wellington picked up Ethan yesterday and still hasn't brought him back. He won't answer my calls. I'm worried." And Mr. Mason called, saying he's coming home early from his trip. There was a pause as she listened to her director's response. "I don't know if he suspects anything. He's been acting strange these last few days, watching things closely, asking a lot of questions about Ethan." Another pause. "Of course I didn't tell him anything. Ethan knows not to talk. He's too scared to tell anyone." I felt my blood boil. She was talking about torturing our son as if it were something normal, like it was a secret that simply shouldn't be shared with me. "I have to hang up now, Director. I'm going to call Mark again." As soon as she left the room, I closed the app and got back in the car. I needed to get home as soon as possible. When I finally arrived in town, it was past 9 in the morning. I went straight to Mark's house as we had agreed. He answered the door with a serious expression. "He's still asleep," Mark said quietly. "He only managed to drift off around 5 in the morning. He seemed afraid to close his eyes. Can I see him?" Mark led me to the guest room where Ethan was sleeping, curled up in the blankets with a peaceful expression I hadn't seen in a long time. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently ran my hand through his hair. He stirred a little but didn't wake up. "William," Mark called from the hall. "We need to talk now." I left the room, leaving the door ajar so I could hear if Ethan woke up. In the living room, Mark and his wife Sarah were waiting for me, their expressions worried. "I took his shirt off to give him a bath last night," Sarah said, her eyes teary. "He has marks on his back, William. Old marks, new marks, like someone hits him regularly." "I know," I finished, feeling the tears return to my eyes. "I know, I saw it." "You said you have videos?" Mark reminded me. I took out my phone and showed them the recordings from the last 2 nights. Sarah had to leave the room crying. Mark watched in silence, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Oh my God, William," he said when the videos finished. This is monstrous. I can't believe highly paid professionals were capable of this." "Me neither," I replied, putting away the phone. "But we need to act fast. Mrs. Evans is already suspicious." "She's called you several times. I need to take Ethan somewhere safe and go to the police. I'm going to Child Protective Services." Just then, we heard a small voice coming from the hallway. "Dad?" Ethan was standing there, rubbing his sleepy eyes. When he saw me, he ran to me and threw himself into my arms, sobbing. I hugged him tightly, promising myself that I would never let anyone hurt my son again. "It's all right now, son," I whispered in his ear. "Dad's here. No one will hurt you anymore." He clung to me as if his life depended on it, and in a way, it really did. I sat on the sofa with Ethan in my lap, his face buried in my chest, his small hands clutching my shirt as if he feared I might disappear at any moment. Mark and Sarah gave us space, going into the kitchen to make coffee. I just sat there holding my son, feeling his trembling body gradually calm down. "Buddy," I called softly when I felt he was more relaxed. "I need to talk to you about something really important." He lifted his face, his eyes still red from crying. There was so much fear there. So much pain for a child so small. "You don't have to be scared anymore," I continued, holding his little hands in mine. "I know what was happening when I wasn't there. I know what Mrs. Evans was doing to you at night." His body instantly tensed, and I saw the panic growing in his eyes. "Dad, she'll be mad if she knows I said something." "You didn't say anything, son. I found out on my own," I explained, trying to calm him. "I installed a camera in your room before I traveled. I saw everything that happened." Ethan looked at me, confused, trying to process what I was saying. You saw?" "I saw, son. I saw everything she was doing to you. The tape on your mouth, the hitting." He lowered his head as if he were ashamed. "I'm sorry, Dad. Those 2 words broke me. My son apologizing for being a victim of abuse." I held his face in my hands, making him look at me. "Ethan, listen closely to what Dad is going to say. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. What Mrs. Evans did to you is wrong. Very wrong. No adult, not even a caregiver, is allowed to hurt a child like that. Do you understand that?" He nodded slowly, but I saw the doubt still in his eyes. "Years of manipulation and fear wouldn't be erased with a few words. How long has this been going on, son?" He bit his lip, hesitating. Since I started the new compliance program. She said it was to teach me to be a good boy for when you were away. She said if I told anyone, nobody would believe me, that she would say I was lying for attention." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling a physical pain, thinking that this had been going on for so long, practically an entire year, and I hadn't realized it. All those trips, all those nights I left my son alone with his abuser, and when I was visiting, did she do this too? He shook his head. Not as much. Only when the night staff was on duty. She would wait until the other staff were busy and come into my room, but it was quicker because she was afraid they'd hear something. I remembered all the times I woke up and found myself driving away, leaving him there. All the mornings I found Ethan looking defeated, with dark circles and no energy. How could I have been so blind? When she hit you, why did she say she was doing it? Ethan shrugged. Sometimes it was because I was rocking too much, or because I didn't transition quickly enough, or because I didn't eat all my dinner. He paused, swallowing. But most of the time she said she didn't need a reason, that it was so I could learn to be strong. A tear escaped my eye, and I quickly wiped it away. I needed to be strong for him now. "Ethan, look at me," I asked, waiting for his eyes to meet mine. "As of today, this is over. You will never go through this again. Never, I promise you. And Mrs. Evans? Don't you worry about her. You won't be alone with her ever again." Just then, Mark returned to the living room, bringing a tray with hot cocoa and cookies. Sarah came behind him, her eyes still red from crying. "Look, Ethan," Mark said, forcing a smile. "Aunt Sarah made hot cocoa for you." Ethan looked at the tray, then at me as if asking for permission. "Go ahead, son. You must be hungry." He climbed off my lap and went to sit at the table, where Sarah helped him pour the cocoa into a colorful mug. While he ate, Mark gestured for me to follow him out to the backyard. "So, William, what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to the precinct," I said, determined. I'm going to show the videos, file a report, and ask for an emergency protection order. I'm going to do everything necessary to get that place shut down and Mrs. Evans arrested. You know this is going to be messy, right? That you might face resistance from the facility. I looked at him seriously. Mark, what she did, what she's been doing for months, is criminal. A caregiver who tortures a child in her care doesn't deserve her freedom. And yes, if the justice system decides she should go to jail, so be it. He nodded slowly. You're right. It's just hard to accept that people you trust are capable of something like that. But Ethan comes first. He's just a kid. Exactly, I agreed. And I failed him once. I won't fail him again. What can I do to help? You're already helping, Mark, by giving us shelter, by protecting my son when I couldn't. I just need you and Sarah to stay with Ethan while I go to the precinct. I don't want him to go through this right now. Of course. No problem. He can stay here as long as necessary. We went back inside and found Ethan more cheerful, talking quietly with Sarah while she served him more cookies. It was the first time in a long time that I'd seen him like this, almost relaxed, almost like the boy he should be. Buddy, I called, kneeling beside him. Dad needs to go out for a few hours to take care of some important things. You'll stay here with Uncle Mark and Aunt Sarah, okay? The panic immediately returned to his eyes. You'll come back, right, Dad? Promise. Of course I'm coming back, son, I promise. I'm just going to sort some things out to make sure you're safe. Mrs. Evans. She won't come and get me, will she? No, I replied firmly. She's not coming here. Are you sure you understood? He nodded, but still looked insecure. Sarah, sensing his fear, suggested, Ethan, how about we set up the big train track in the basement while your dad takes care of things? The suggestion seemed to cheer him up a little. I gave him one last hug before leaving, promising him again that I'd be back soon. On the way to the precinct, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was a restricted number, the facility, of course. I ignored the first few calls, but on the fifth try, I decided to answer. I needed to buy time. Hello? I answered dryly. Mr. Mason? The director, Mr. Hill, exclaimed, sounding relieved. Thank God. We've been trying to call you for hours. Mark took Ethan last night and still hasn't returned him. We are concerned about his continuity of care. The institutional hypocrisy in his voice infuriated me. Continuity of care for the son they systematically harmed. He's fine, I replied, trying to control the rage in my voice. He's still with Mark. Why didn't you inform us you were removing him, and where are you? We need him back for his scheduled therapy. I'm taking care of some private business, I evaded. I'll be in touch later. Mr. Mason, what is going on? You're acting strange. We need to document his status. We'll talk when I get there, I replied, and hung up before he could ask any more questions. At the sheriff's office, I was met by a detective who listened to my account with attention and seriousness. When I showed the videos, she shook her head, visibly disturbed. Mr. Mason, this is a serious case of physical and emotional child abuse in a vulnerable setting, she explained. We are going to take all the necessary measures. First, we will file a detailed report and request an emergency protection order against Mrs. Evans and a temporary injunction against the facility. And what about the custody of my son? You can immediately file for a custody modification while the process moves forward. With this evidence, it is very likely the judge will grant the petition. I spent the next few hours giving a statement, filling out forms, and sending the videos to the police system. The detective called Child Protective Services, CPS, which sent a representative to monitor the case immediately. Everything seemed to be happening in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. When I finally left the precinct, it was late afternoon. I had a police report and a protocol for the protection order petition in hand. The detective assured me that an officer would go to the facility that very day to notify Mrs. Evans about the order, which prohibited her from approaching Ethan or contacting him in any way. As I drove back to Mark's house, I received a call from an unknown number. It was the CPS officer informing me that he had just served Mrs. Evans with the protection order notification. She didn't react well, he commented. She became agitated, saying it was all lies, that you were making things up to get the facility shut down. That was to be expected, I replied, tired. Do you have a safe place to stay with the minor? Because she won't be able to remain in the facility. Yes, we're at my brother's house for now. I plan to rent a place of my own in the coming days. Excellent. Any problems, contact the precinct immediately. When I arrived at Mark's house, I found Ethan calmer, watching the train set with Sarah. When he saw me, he ran to hug me. You came back, he exclaimed, relieved. I promised, didn't I? I smiled, picking him up. And Dad always keeps his promises. Mark called me into the kitchen while Sarah stayed with Ethan in the living room. Mrs. Evans came here, he said quietly. I felt my blood run cold. What, when? About an hour ago. She was furious, saying you'd made up lies about her, that you wanted to ruin her career. She said she had just received an order and knew we were here. She tried to come in to see Ethan. Tried? She tried, but I didn't let her. I told her she was very upset and it would be better to return when she was calmer. I reminded her the protection order was against her, not us. She eventually left, but I'm sure she'll be back. We're going to have to leave here, I concluded, running a hand through my hair. I don't want to involve you guys more than I already have. Where will you go? I'll rent a hotel room for now, until I find an apartment. Don't be foolish, William. Mark put his hand on my shoulder. You can stay here for as long as you need. My house is big. We have the guest room. Ethan is already feeling comfortable here. I don't want to cause trouble for you and Sarah. This is very complicated. Ethan is just a child. He didn't deserve to go through this. You're staying here until you get settled again. End of story. I felt a wave of gratitude for that man who, despite the personal risk, chose to side with what was right, with justice, and the protection of an innocent child. That night, when I tucked Ethan into the guest room, he asked me to stay until he fell asleep. I lay down beside him, and we remained in silence for a few minutes. Dad? He called quietly. Mrs. Evans won't hurt me anymore, right? No, son, never again, I promised, holding his little hand. Dad is going to protect you, always. She got really mad because you found out. I think so, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you're safe now. He was silent for a few more moments. Then he whispered, You know, Dad, I tried to tell you so many times. I was so scared. I felt tears return to my eyes. I'm so sorry I didn't find out sooner, son. I'm so sorry. It wasn't your fault, Dad, he said with a wisdom beyond his years. She said it was a secret, that everyone would think I was lying, that even you would think I was making things up. I would never think that, Ethan. Never. You can always tell me everything. I will always believe you. He smiled faintly, the first genuine smile I'd seen on his face in a long time. Soon after, he fell asleep holding my hand. I stayed there watching my son sleep in peace, perhaps for the first time in many weeks. and I swore I would do everything to rebuild our lives and give him back the stability he deserved. The next day, I received a call from my lawyer, whom I had hired to handle the custody case. He had news. Mr. Mason, the judge has granted your petition for temporary custody. You have exclusive custody of Ethan until the case is adjudicated. Mrs. Evans and the facility are prohibited from contacting you. Furthermore, the court has issued an emergency order against Harmony House, pending a full investigation into their policies and staff. I felt an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. It was only the beginning of a long legal battle, I knew that. But it was a start, an important step in ensuring my son's safety. When I hung up the phone, I saw Ethan watching me from the kitchen doorway, his eyes full of hope and fear at the same time. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I opened my arms and he ran to me. I hugged him with all the strength of my love, knowing we had a long road ahead but determined to make everything work out. "Yes, son. I promise you, we are going to be okay." The weeks that followed were weeks of adjustment and healing. We rented a small apartment close to Mark and Sarah's house, which continued to be our safe haven. I had to make difficult decisions about my job. The long consulting trips were incompatible with the new reality of being a single father. I spoke with my firm and managed to arrange a deal. I started taking only regional projects that allowed me to be home every night. Ethan began therapy 3 times a week. Dr. Ramirez, the psychologist, specialized in childhood trauma and had a lot of experience with child victims of institutional abuse. At first, my son was reluctant to talk, but slowly he began to open up, expressing his fears and pain in ways his small mind could process. One afternoon, after a particularly intense session, Dr. Ramirez asked to speak with me alone. "Mr. Mason, Ethan is making progress, but the trauma is deep," she explained seriously. "He lived for approximately a year under constant terror, always dreading the moment his caregiver would enter the room to hurt him. Will he overcome this someday? Children are surprisingly resilient when they have adequate support." She smiled faintly. "The fact that you acted quickly when you discovered the abuse was crucial. Many children are victimized for years because the adults around them don't believe them or choose not to see." "I should have noticed it sooner," I said, feeling the weight of the guilt I still carried. "Abusers are very skilled at hiding their actions. Mr. Mason, and from what Ethan told me, Mrs. Evans constantly threatened him to ensure his silence. She chose moments when you weren't around or when she believed you wouldn't notice. This is typical of institutional abusers. I thought of all the trips, all the nights I spent away from home, leaving my son vulnerable. I'm going to change my job permanently. No more long consulting trips." "That's an important decision," she nodded. "The constant presence of a protective adult is fundamental to Ethan's recovery. He needs to feel safe, to know he can trust you to be there." "I'll always be there," I promised. "And regarding supervised contact," she paused. "The law grants Mrs. Evans the right to seek future contact, and I don't know how Ethan will react to seeing his abuser." Dr. Ramirez sighed. "That's a delicate matter. Legally, she has that right, unless it's proven that future contact would be detrimental to Ethan's mental health. Based on what I've seen, I can prepare a report for the court recommending that any contact be temporarily suspended, at least until Ethan is more emotionally stable." "That would help a lot," I replied, relieved. "He still wakes up screaming some nights, calling out, afraid that she'll come to hurt him. Nightmares are common in trauma cases. They will decrease with time in therapy." She paused. Mr. Mason, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Ethan mentioned that Mrs. Evans used structure and therapeutic jargon to justify the punishments. She said it was compliance training, and that she was doing it for his growth. I felt my stomach churn. I never imagined she would use the specialized program as an excuse for... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Unfortunately, this is more common than one might imagine. Some people twist therapeutic concepts to justify violence against children. This also explains part of the moral confusion Ethan feels. He was led to believe he deserved the suffering, that it was for his benefit. I left that session with a heavy heart, but also with more clarity on how to help my son. On the way home, we stopped at the bookstore cafe, a small ritual we had established after therapy sessions. It was our way of turning a potentially difficult day into one that ended on a positive note. "How was the conversation with Dr. Ramirez today, son?" I asked as he sipped his hot cocoa. "It was good," he replied, more openly than he usually was. "She taught me how to use a special device when I start to feel scared." "And does it work?" He shrugged. "Sometimes, when it's not a really big scare, and when it is a really big scare, what do? "I think about you, Dad," he said simply. "I think that now you're going to protect me." Those simple words made my eyes well up. I put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. "Always, son, always." That night, while Ethan slept, Mark came over for a visit. He seemed tense, worried. "What's wrong, Mark?" I asked, offering him a coffee. "Mrs. Evans is trying to build a case against you," he said directly. "Her lawyer is claiming you are an absent father who always left Ethan's specialized care in the hands of the facility while you traveled, and that you're now using false accusations to avoid paying the monthly fees." "False accusations?" I repeated, incredulous. "I have videos, Mark. Videos of her torturing my son." I know, he tried to calm me. "I'm just telling you what she's planning. She says she's going to find witnesses, other staff, former parents, who will say she was always a dedicated professional. And what those people say matters more than the concrete evidence of what she was doing when no one was looking." I argued, frustrated. "William, you know how complicated the justice system can be, especially when it comes to custody disputes. She's leveraging the fact that you spent a lot of time away from home for work." I ran a tired hand over my face. "That's why I already changed my work routine. I'm only doing local projects now." "That's good," Mark nodded. "It will help show the judge you are committed to Ethan's well-being." "But I shouldn't have to prove that," I argued. "I'm not the one who was hitting my son every night, taping his mouth shut so no one would hear his screams." Mark sighed deeply. "I know it's outrageous, but you have to prepare for a difficult battle. I'm prepared to face whatever is necessary for my son." In the days that followed, I received notification that Mrs. Evans had filed a petition to revoke the protective order and challenge the temporary custody. As Mark had warned me, she was building a case based on my supposed absence as a father due to work travel. Following my lawyer's advice, I began to meticulously document our new routine. I took Ethan to his new, smaller school every morning and picked him up every afternoon. I attended all his therapy sessions. I participated in school meetings. We went on outings together on weekends. I took photos, saved receipts, and requested statements from the school and the psychologist. At home, Ethan continued to have occasional night awakenings, but they were becoming less frequent. Little by little, he was returning to the cheerful boy I remembered, although he still had moments of sudden fear or deep sadness. One night, while helping him with a special project, he asked me a question that took me by surprise. "Dad, Mrs. Evans didn't love me, did she?" I put down the pencil I was holding and turned completely toward him. "Why do you ask that, son?" He shrugged, but I could see he was fighting back tears. "Because she hurt me so badly." "You only hurt people you don't love, right? How do you explain something so complex to an 8-year-old? How do you make him understand that the problem wasn't him? It never was him. Ethan, what Mrs. Evans did to you has nothing to do with whether you're a good or bad boy, or whether she loved you or not. There are adults who are sick in here," I pointed to my head, "and in here," I pointed to my heart. "They do very bad things because they don't know how to handle their own feelings and problems." "So Mrs. Evans is sick?" he asked, trying to understand. "In a way, yes. It's not a sickness like the flu or a stomach ache. It's a sickness that makes a person hurt others, especially those who can't defend themselves. And that is very, very wrong." He was silent for a moment, processing what I had told him. "Will she ever get better?" That was the hardest question. "I don't know, son. Some people manage to realize they are sick and seek help to get better. Others don't. But the most important thing is that you are safe now. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep you that way. And if the judge says I have to go back to Harmony House?" he asked with evident fear in his voice. "That's not going to happen," I assured him, pulling him into a hug. "We have proof of what she did, and your well-being is what matters most to the judge. Plus, Dr. Ramirez is helping to explain to the court that you need time to feel safe again." That conversation continued to resonate in my mind for days. My son, so small, trying to understand why a professional had subjected him to such cruelty. 2 weeks later, we received the news. Mrs. Evans's petition to revoke the protective order had been denied. Dr. Ramirez's report, along with the videos and Ethan's own testimony given in a protected environment with psychological support, were decisive. The judge not only maintained the protective order, but also temporarily suspended any right to contact, determining that Mrs. Evans would have to undergo psychological evaluation and mandatory treatment before any contact with Ethan could be reestablished. It was a significant victory, but I knew the battle wasn't over yet. She wouldn't give up easily, and we still had to face the final hearing to determine permanent custody. That night, as Ethan slept peacefully for the first time in many weeks, I sat on the balcony of our small apartment and reflected on everything we had been through. The terrible discovery, the desperate rescue, the nights of fear, the court battles. It had been the most difficult period of our lives, but also the start of our healing. I looked up at the stars, thinking about how our future now seemed a little clearer, a little more hopeful. Ethan was starting to smile again, to play, to trust. I had found a new balance between work and family, prioritizing what really mattered. And although the road was still long, for the first time in a long time, I truly believed we would be okay. My phone vibrated with a message. It was Mark, sending a photo he had taken that day during a hike. Ethan was smiling as he held a pine cone, his eyes shining with a genuine joy I hadn't seen in so long. Below the photo was Mark's message. "That smile is worth every battle, isn't it?" I replied, my heart full. Every single one. Today, almost 2 years after that fateful night when I installed the camera in my son's room, our lives have taken a completely different path. We live in a small but comfortable house with a yard where Ethan can play and where we planted a small rock garden together. I have a stable job as a logistics manager for a local engineering firm. No more long trips. I'm always home every night. Ethan is 10 years old now. The traumatic awakenings that were once frequent are now rare. He continues therapy, but we've reduced it to once a week. Dr. Ramirez says his progress is remarkable. Although some emotional scars will probably stay with him for a long time, he has learned to deal with those wounds, to understand that what happened wasn't his fault, and to recognize warning signs and ask for help when needed. At school, my son is once again an engaged student. He has made new friends and recently joined the robotics club. Seeing the focus on his face when he codes a robot, hearing his carefree laugh while playing with his teammates, those are the moments that show me our fight was worth it. As for Mrs. Evans, the justice system took its course. After many hearings and psychological evaluations, she was found guilty of child abuse and professional negligence. She was sentenced to community service and mandatory psychiatric treatment. In addition to the definitive loss of her professional license and any right to contact with Ethan, the facility was shut down after the full investigation. She still tries from time to time to regain some form of contact, always claiming she is healed and remorseful. The judge wisely maintains the decision that any contact must be pre-approved by Ethan and his therapeutic team. To this day, my son has shown no interest in seeing his abuser again. When the subject comes up, he becomes quiet, thoughtful, and usually changes the topic. Dr. Ramirez explained that this is normal and healthy. He is protecting himself, setting boundaries, something that was denied to him for so long. What struck me most throughout this journey was realizing how abuse against vulnerable children can happen silently, right under our noses. Mrs. Evans maintained a perfect image of a dedicated caregiver in everyone's eyes, colleagues, staff, and even me. No one would ever suspect what she did when the doors closed. No one except her terrified son, who had no voice or power to defend himself. I learned to always be alert to the signs. Ethan's behavioral changes weren't just a phase or growth, as Mrs. Evans tried to convince me. They were silent cries for help that I, unfortunately, was slow to hear. Today I am much more observant, not just with my son, but with other children around me. I've identified suspicious situations a few times and haven't hesitated to contact the competent authorities. It's better to investigate and find out everything is fine than to ignore it and allow another child to continue suffering. At home, we built a relationship based on absolute trust. Ethan knows he can tell me anything without fear of judgment or punishment. We have our rules and boundaries, of course, but they are always discussed with respect and affection. Discipline is taught through conversations, logical consequences, and example, never ever through physical or psychological violence. One of the things I am most proud of is seeing how Ethan has become an empathetic and protective child. At school, he often defends classmates who are being bullied or who seem vulnerable. "Everyone deserves to feel safe, Dad," he told me once, with wisdom beyond his years. Recently, I was invited to give testimony at a support group for parents who have gone through child protection situations. I shared our story, highlighting the importance of being alert to the signs, of believing children when they try to communicate that something is wrong, and of acting quickly when there is suspicion of abuse. After my talk, a parent approached me crying. He had just discovered that his child's therapist was being inappropriate during sessions. I installed cameras after noticing strange behavior in my child, just like you did. Your testimony gave me the courage to move forward with the process, he said, squeezing my hand. Knowing that it's possible to rebuild your life, that children can recover, that gave me hope. And that is what I carry with me every day. Hope. Hope that Ethan continues his path of healing, that he grows up strong and confident despite the adversities he faced so early in life. Hope that our story can help other families identify and interrupt cycles of violence. Hope that as a society, we can better protect our children. That camera I installed in my son's room not only documented the horror he was living through, it saved his life. It allowed me to see the dark truth hidden in the place I trusted and gave me the necessary tools to protect him. It was a desperate gesture that turned into salvation. Today, when I see Ethan playing carelessly in the yard, working on his small robot with our dog, a playful setter we adopted last year, I see a child who is finally living the childhood he deserves. The eyes that once carried so much fear now shine with joy and curiosity. The deep dark circles have given way to rosy cheeks. The scared silence has transformed into laughter and animated conversations about his school days, his friends, his dreams. Sometimes when we're watching a nature documentary together or reading a bedtime story, he snuggles into my arms in a way that reminds me how far we've come. In those moments, I silently give thanks for having followed my instincts that night, for not having ignored the signs, for having the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful. The journey wasn't easy. There were days of despair, doubt, and guilt. There were nights when I wondered if we would ever completely overcome the trauma. But every small step forward, a genuine smile, a night without fear, a spontaneous hug, showed me we were on the right path. To the parents watching me, I leave you with a piece of advice born from pain and experience. Trust your instincts. If something seems wrong with your child, it probably is. Children change their behavior for various reasons, but drastic changes, especially those involving fear, withdrawal, and physical signs, should never be ignored. Talk to your children. Be present. Observe. Listen not only to what they say, but also to what they don't say, what they express through behavior, drawings, and games. And remember, violence against children has no justification. It is not discipline. It is not education. It is not for their own good. It is pure and simple abuse. And as a society, we have a duty to protect the most vulnerable, to give a voice to those who often cannot or fear to speak for themselves. Our story had a good outcome, despite all the adversities. Ethan is safe, he is healing, and he is growing up surrounded by love and respect. Not all stories end this way. Some children spend years, decades, an entire lifetime suffering abuse because no one intervenes, no one notices, no one believes. Don't let that happen. Be vigilant. Be the voice. Be the protection that every child deserves. If this story touched your heart, give a like so that this dad can feel happy. Subscribe to the Long Distance Father channel right now so you don't miss the next stories I will tell with all my heart. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. If you know of a similar case to ours, or if you've had to make a difficult decision to protect a child, Share your experience. It makes this, Dad, very happy to know which city you're watching from, and at what time of day you're keeping me company, and also to be able to exchange experiences that can help other families. A big hug the size of my heart. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.